Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Growing Places, where we uncover the stories of the entrepreneurs and innovators who are changing the way we eat. I'm your host. My name is Nate from Urban Leaf, and I've been really looking forward to this conversation today with a guy who I've actually known a few years now. I think it was 2016 that we met. Is that right, Rob? Yeah,
I
so
think so.
sounds about right. Yeah, so our guest today is a serial entrepreneur. He also happens to be the CEO and founder of a really interesting business located in New York City called Farm.One. And here to tell you a lot more about that, as well as all the interesting things he's up to, is Rob Laing. Welcome to the channel, Rob.
Hey Nate, good to be here. Good to chat with you.
Likewise, likewise. So, Rob, 2020, I'm sure this is going to go down as one for the record books. It's been a pretty remarkable year for those of us in the food and ag tech industry, and I'm really looking forward to digging into that with you shortly. Before we do, though, I was wondering if you could maybe just get started by telling us a little bit about what it is that you do over there at Farm.One.
Sure, yeah. So Farm.One, we're a vertical farm. So you can actually see me. I'm standing in the farm right here. We use hydroponics and we use LED lighting to grow a very wide variety of crops year round. We're actually located in a basement in Tribeca in Manhattan, which is a quite a fancy zip code in the city, surrounded by lots of fancy restaurants and lots of places for people to eat normally. And we traditionally, over the past 4 years or so, we've been growing very rare crops, edible flowers, microgreens, and that kind of thing. And normally we would be selling those to restaurants and also welcoming people to the farm for tours and classes and experiences like that. And obviously this year we've had a lot of changes. And so right now we're concentrating on selling a similar range of products to consumers via a subscription and also working on our technology and all these kinds of things. But yeah, we're a vertical farm at the heart of it and tend to focus on specialty produce.
Cool. And so, Rob, this is actually the third company that you founded, from what I understand. I think the first one was in design, and then you ran some sort of translation business in Japan after that. Could you tell us a little bit about your sort of entrepreneurial voyage and how on earth did you end up growing exotic produce in a basement in Manhattan? How did you get here?
Yeah, yeah, sure. So my background is really in design. I studied graphic design in the UK, and my background in my career, I started my career as a designer, but I've always been someone who's been interested in technology and building software, building websites, and always been around a lot of people who were starting companies or just doing entrepreneurial stuff. And so it was pretty natural for me to like start a little design agency, and then I went on when I was living in Japan to starting this translation technology company called Gengo. And that was all about, trying to make more efficient the process of technology, of translation using crowdsourcing. And I started that company back in 2008, I guess. Did that, we raised a bunch of VC money, we grew the company, and eventually that company was acquired actually about a year and a half ago. And, that was an interesting kind of journey. Although I left, a little bit before that acquisition, and I sort of was, desperate to leave Japan, and I was like really looking for something to do completely different to
Mm,
that, to be honest. And so, what captured my imagination really was food, and I sort of, was trying to find some way of marrying the ideas around technology that I had and my
mm,
love of food, and I kind of came across vertical farming just as this completely new thing to me. I remember back in 2015
mm,
seeing people on TV like using lights to grow food, and I sort of had some vague familiarity with what hydroponics was, but I didn't really know anything. So I entered this industry really just with an idea of like, okay, let's just try something out. I wanted to start really small and really
mm,
just looking at the pure economics of it. I knew that I would have to grow something like a specialty product in order to have any chance of making money in this very difficult business. So that's
mm.
how Farm.One really got started. But yeah, it's very sort of natural for me to want to start businesses and, run businesses. I'm someone who's kind of ruined for normal employment at this point, I think. So, Farm.One's a continuation of that. Yeah.
I hear you. I hear you. No, I think we both make terrible employees. Um,
Right.
so Rob, I guess one kind of theme that's coming up a lot there in what you're saying is, your use of and interest in technology, which is, something that you guys do a lot of. I was wondering if you could just elaborate and expand a little bit on some of the technology that you are utilizing at Farm.One and, the importance that it, has to your business.
Yeah, sure. So, vertical farming inherently, there's a lot of hardware tech involved. There's the LED lights, there's the hydroponic systems. A lot of people get very, interested in the monitoring and the automation of these farms. And we use some of that tech, but that's not really, what we tend to focus on. We tend to focus more on the operational aspects of how do you run these small farms and how do you do that in an efficient way, but still using a fair amount of labor. So our goal is not really to automate every last process like harvesting and seeding, etc.
Mm.
It's about trying to find efficient ways to work on small farms and small farms that are more sort of human and accessible than the kind of massive plant factories that you might have seen and that other companies are kind of focusing on. And so that involves us, even thinking about, okay, how do people do tasks on the farm? How do people track the different crops that are moving around? How do people harvest and then maybe check quality? And how do you do
Mm.
that in a way that's, much more like a sort of independent restaurant rather than a big chain like a Olive Garden or a McDonald's or something
Mm-hmm.
like that, to use an analogy. And
Mm.
we think there's lots and lots of problems to solve there that we can help ourselves, become more efficient internally. And gradually we can expose some of those things as well to other people and help them start farms as well. So it's all about, making small farms run really efficiently.
Mm-hmm.
And there's lots and lots of software problems to solve there. And that's sort of what we're chipping away at on the
Mm.
technology side.
Gotcha, gotcha. So I guess on the technology front, one of the things, one of the observations folks might make of this industry or this space is that like a lot of the operations and businesses like yours literally could not have existed like 10 years ago. Like we just didn't have the LED grow lights, other gadgetry, other sensors, etc. So,
Right.
technology has certainly been a very big enabler of, businesses like yours and, many of your peers. If you kind of look forward another 5 or 10 years and think about, some of the trends that you're seeing and the patterns emerging, what do you think this industry might look like, and what sorts of new things might technology enable 5 or 10 years from now?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think it's a really interesting time. I think that, you've got a lot of venture funding going into larger startups in this space. They tend
Mm.
to be building really big farms, and their job really is to eliminate every last cost and every last bit of labor and automate every piece of that and get to a really efficient kind of factory for plants. And I think they'll get there, but it will take years and years and years because they're building that automation from the ground up and they're working with very, very low margins. I think there's another movement that's going on, which is really interesting about lots of small individuals, small businesses, people starting farms in their garage, in their basement. They're
Mm.
selling at farmers markets. They're growing microgreens. Some of them are growing cannabis, obviously. So there's a lot of
Mm-hmm.
sort of mixture between food and that cannabis industry as well. And, if you look at it in one way, you could equate it a little bit like the dot-com boom or the web boom, where yes, you had companies building huge sort of monolithic businesses like Cisco and Google, etc. You have other businesses that are very small and people, trying to build tools to enable people to build websites like WordPress, for instance.
Mm.
So
Mm.
to create an analogy, there's a whole sort of open source kind of community there as well. And I think that, those two paths are a little bit different. Like you've got these companies building big farms that are, concentrated on building IP. They're
Mm.
creating custom sort of automated systems for moving plants around and stuff like that. And then you got the garage, backyard innovators kind of thing. And they're making sort of different kinds of tech that are more approachable. And we're very much in that camp. We're very much about supporting that kind of drive.
Mm-hmm.
But in terms of, I think what the consumer might see, you're going to see more and more of these vertically farmed products on your grocery store shelves. You can already buy AeroFarms products and Bowery products from Amazon Fresh or from Whole Foods, etc. They're on the market. But what you're finding right now is the price point for that is like heavily subsidized by VC money, really. So you might be
Right.
paying $5 for a clamshell and actually, it costs $7 to produce that kind of thing. So a little bit like when you buy an Uber, when you pay for an Uber, the real price of that should be probably $10 and you're paying $7 because it's subsidized by so much investment. So you've
Right.
got a bit of that going on, but these products they are going to start to compete really on price terms. And then I think what you're going to see as well is different products being grown. Of course, everyone started with leafy greens because they grow very quickly, command a very high price point, and they're very, very perishable. So they're perfect for vertical farming because you can be so close to your customer. But what you're going to see is, strawberries. Oishi Berry is a vertical farming company in New Jersey. They're concentrating on gourmet strawberries. I think you're going to see a lot more of that kind of thing. And a few other sort of fruit products, the easier ones to grow in vertical farming being, of course, strawberries and maybe a couple of others, but those kinds of things where you've got a product which is very um, sensitive, it's very sort of fragile. That kind of thing is an ideal target for vertical farming. But the last thing I would say that's continues to be a really interesting trend is the price of LEDs continues to go down. Not as fast as we might have liked, but just as you've seen with solar, for someone to install solar panels on their house 15 years ago, you had to be a bit of an obsessive, a bit of a nut. To
Yeah.
do it now in a lot of the country or a lot of the world, it's a financially sensible choice. You'd be silly not to do it in a way. And so the price of LEDs is going down, the sort of complexity of this technology is going down. And so we expect to see a lot more small farms and people being able to pick up this technology relatively easily. And we think that's really, really exciting.
Got it. Got it. Okay. So there's some pretty interesting things to look forward to there. Is it accurate, Rob, to say that as we think about the evolution of LED lights and kind of what's coming next, you mentioned strawberries a couple of times there. Are we going to kind of go along a biomass curve, so to speak? I mean, things like lettuce and basil. There's not a lot there. Like it's just a thin leaf, and that's where most of the indoor vertical farms have begun. Sort of small fruiting plants like strawberries are one step away from that, but it's a big step up in biomass if you're talking about like apples or larger vegetables and that sort of stuff. Is it accurate to say that they're going to be a fair bit further down the line or further away?
Yeah, I think you want to look at a few things, like how when a crop is harvested, what's its shelf life? Apples, if they're stored correctly, long shelf life, easy to transport, can be transported long distances pretty easily. Strawberries is they're tough. If you have a temperature fluctuation in a pallet of strawberries, you can easily get mold, very, very quickly, even if it's been harvested a couple of days ago. And so that's an ideal thing where you want to shorten that supply chain, and vertical farming makes sense because you grow strawberries right next to like Tokyo, New York City, Hong Kong, you do that right next to a mass of consumption. Whereas you take something like a carrot, okay, you're not getting a high price for that anyway. You can store it a long time. It's relatively cheap to grow, all this kind of
Right.
stuff. It's going to be either a while before that kind of product ends up in a vertical farm, or maybe it never makes sense. So
Yeah.
I think farmers are looking at that from a commercial angle. A lot of those products, it's difficult to make them make sense. And then, all the other players in the chain, like the supermarkets, they're not super excited about getting potatoes from a vertical farm because their potato supply chain is pretty reliable. You can store a lot of potatoes and put up with, some variations in the supply, as opposed to something like romaine, where you have an E. coli scare, and then all of a sudden, oh my God, the whole thing shut
Yeah.
down.
Right.
Big crisis for supermarkets. So they look at vertical farms and go like, I can solve my problem that way.
Got
That's
it.
really attractive. So you got to look at each crop on a sort of case by case basis. There, definitely.
Yeah. Totally. That makes sense. Okay. So we've kind of covered technology. I was wondering if we could change gears a little bit, Rob, and kind of talk about the environment and sustainability. You are growing a pretty wide variety of crops and plants. I assume that the sort of supply that you are producing, for New York City is in some cases, but maybe not all cases, displacing produce that would have otherwise been imported in some cases, I assume, from quite a long way away. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about the or compare and contrast the environmental footprint of the produce that you're growing in your farm in New York versus the alternative that you are presumably displacing.
Yeah, absolutely. So, if you think about our sort of normal supply, we're growing things like, these bachelor buttons, like these flowers, right? Which are the kind of things that chefs would be getting shipped in from California to New York or from Ohio or some other places like that, where there's some really good farms, but they have to ship their product, and they have to really ship it overnight, really, on a plane.
Mm.
So they got to have all this packaging, installation. It's got to be chilled, so you got to refrigerated transport, infrastructure there, which, it creates emissions. It also creates just a huge amount of packaging. So there's lots of plastic
Mm.
stuff and styrofoam stuff that has to get disposed of. So there's a greenhouse gas impact, but there's also a pollution impact or, a waste management impact as well. And then, you think about the externalities of running a soil farm. Of course, some of these guys using pesticides. They're irrigating their farms. That
Mm.
water is getting run off, et cetera, et cetera. We operate in a relatively specialist market, so I wouldn't want anyone to think, okay, America's herb growers are,
Mm.
causing climate change above, animal agriculture or anything like that. But it
Yeah.
but it is an impact, right? Whereas take something like a vertical farm, starting with the easy stuff, the water is recirculated, so the water use of these farms is very, very, very low. We do purge the water occasionally, we bring in new water, but in terms of efficiency, we normally use more water for laundry and the toilets and whatever than the farm
Right.
uses,
Mm-hmm.
start.
Yeah.
Um, but then you go, okay, we are using these lights, right? And these lights consume a fair amount of power. We happen to buy our power from renewable sources because we didn't really want to have a greenhouse gas impact, but that power does have to be produced. And then you've got all this equipment, you've got plastic trays, and you've got metal racks, and you've got LEDs with rare earth metals in them, all that kind of stuff. And so there
Mm.
is, a sort of long-term life cycle impact of these farms.
Mm-hmm.
So what we're trying to do is make sure, okay, if we're sourcing power, it's from renewable sources. If we're delivering stuff, we try to deliver in reusable packaging. We try to use subways and bikes and stuff like that. So we try to sort of minimize every other impact. And then we've
Mm-hmm.
got this power usage, which is relatively high, but we do buy from renewables.
Yeah.
And I hope that most vertical farmers are sort of thinking in a similar way, right? Like you've got the things that you can control,
Mm-hmm.
and then the things you can't. But overall, I would say, look, we have to move towards a future where most of the power used in this country and in the world it comes from renewable sources. Like we just
Mm.
literally don't have a choice, right?
Yeah.
So if you can do that, then the externalities of this kind of farming, are relatively limited as long as they're using it for the right things. And then we go back to, okay, the right
Mm.
things right now tend to be leafy greens, salads, the kind of thing where if you didn't have a very close supply chain and if you didn't have a pesticide-free growing environment, you tend to have a lot of waste. You tend to, increase the chances of foodborne illness, all this kind of stuff. So vertical farming has all these other sort of benefits as well,
Mm-hmm.
that that are part of the sustainability picture.
Gotcha.
But yeah, it's a huge topic.
It's a
Obviously, we
complicated one
talk
for
about
sure,
it.
isn't
And
it? Could go on
yeah,
for.
yeah, but I think the point is to be conscious about it, and also for the vertical farming industry not to just tell people like, oh yeah, it's just all perfect, because it's not. It's a real
Yeah.
business, and we use real materials, and so we've got to be smart about what we do.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah, so I totally get that the sustainability life cycle analysis or comparison here is complicated. On one hand, there's a huge amount of benefits that you're delivering, but you're also creating a decent footprint at the same time, and you kind of got to think about balancing them.
Yeah.
So I guess over here at Urban Leaf, we have, somewhat different business to you, but we are investing in a lot of, packaging and shipping, and we've got all the boxes that we send our e-commerce products out into, and, obviously some of our products have injection molded plastic, for example. So we have a similar issue in that, although we're doing good, we're also, offsetting that at the same time. But one of the main kind of benefits of gardening and this sort of movement towards a greater interest in food that we're particularly interested in is a kind of indirect benefit that it can have, and that is the sort of behavioral changes that it can encourage in consumers when they start to get a little bit more involved in their food. There's one particular research study, I can't remember who published it, but it came out a while back, and this report showed that children in a school who had been engaged in growing their own salad greens were 400% more likely to want to eat salad greens come lunchtime. So basically, whether it's through like gardening or cooking, when people get more engaged with their food, they're way more likely to make a healthy and sustainable food choice. This is a long way of me asking you, for your own business, what sorts of kind of responses and reactions have you seen either in yourself? Like, has your own diet changed and the way you eat changed as you've kind of grown in this business? Has the way that your staff eat has changed? Have you seen any behavioral changes there?
Yeah, I think there's all kinds of things, So I kind of got into this business because I had started to think about what I ate more carefully, and I had a big lifestyle change in, let's say, 2013, 2014, switching at that time predominantly to a plant-based diet, and then like fully in 2015, I guess. Yeah, 2015. And so I was already like, that was already on my mind. And then what we did when we started our first farm, which was inside a culinary school called ICE, is that we had a farm sort of in a glass box, like the windows are all around it. And so people could come in. And what was incredibly apparent was you had all these people coming through culinary school who had never seen a plant growing before.
Wow.
And they were, some of them had committed to sign up for 9 months of culinary school, but they were afraid to like eat a leaf of a plant. They said like, oh,
Wow.
I don't know if I like the taste of a lettuce leaf or something. It's like, come on, guys, like don't be scared of this stuff. And so I completely agree with you. Just being around this stuff and trying it makes you so much more just like, oh yeah, this is fine. This is what we're supposed to do.
Right.
And actually, the experience of a lot of staff who come and work on our farm is that they they walk in for the first time and they go like, oh, there's no way I could possibly learn all these plants and herbs and flowers and things. And what they realize after a couple of weeks is, oh, actually your brain is designed to remember this stuff. You can pick a plant. I've got this blue spice basil next to me.
Mm-hmm.
You smell that. It has a unique smell. You see it. It has a taste. You remember that straight away. You can't forget it. We're wired to do that. And so we're wired, to consume an immense diversity of plants in a natural environment. And so once you get a little taste of that, the idea of like going back to, what the normal American diet is probably about 6 or 7 ingredients. It's just, insane. And so I've certainly sort of just become aware of that bigger picture of how we think. And also, I think there's also, been more research as well about diversity in our diets, how that's good for us. And also, the biodiversity of the foods that we eat and supporting an environment where, you don't have a monocrop agricultural system, which is sort of what a lot of American agriculture is about. It's about soy and it's about corn and it's about wheat.
Yep.
And, these kinds of farms can be places where people can go like, oh, yeah, there's thousands of things we can eat. And that's the most exciting thing for me. So I love seeing kids come in the farm and tasting things for the first time. I love adults coming in and remembering tastes that they never, they've forgotten about completely. And I love the idea that we can, in some ways, just support a little bit more biodiversity in people's diets. So I love that stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. I hear you. That's awesome. Very cool. Very cool. So, Rob, let's change gears a little bit to what's been going on this year. You historically have been primarily focused on restaurants in New York City, And I assume that, as of whenever it was, March or around the beginning of the year when COVID hit, that your customers basically disappeared overnight. I've been kind of a observer through the pivot and evolution that you guys have gone through this year, and I must say it's been remarkable watching how quickly you guys have moved and kind of evolved. Could you share with us a little bit about that evolution and the journey that you guys have been on through this year?
Yeah, I think it's been an incredibly hard time for a lot of farmers, and every farmer is sort of in a slightly different position. Some farms sell to grocery stores and were relatively unaffected, or some farms have seen their demand go up massively, and so it's been a really successful time for some farms. But particularly for farms that sell to chefs, and there's a lot of them in the New York area. Go upstate, and there's people growing specialty vegetables that normally sell to chefs. A lot of farms have found it really tough. And, certainly that was the case for us, because chef sales disappeared overnight, our tours and classes disappeared overnight. And so as a team, we knew that we had this opportunity to sell to consumers. It was a huge lift for us to sort of pivot our operations and put up the website, figure out how to deal with it and all this kind of stuff. And, some things worked well, some things didn't really work well. I think, what was really tricky for us is really, being able to figure out what the best product range was to offer consumers, and how to deal with, this desire that people naturally have been trained to have of having things next day, because we all use Amazon, or we try not to, but we use Amazon, right? We expect things for the next day. And so, we're all in the same bucket now. It's like, okay, we all got to do this kind of stuff. And to be honest, like, that was a sort of unsustainable way of us doing this. It was just too hectic. So we've now switched to this subscription offering, which we're just launching now. We're just in the middle of it, which gives us a lot more predictability. So people sign up for 8 weeks. They pay $250 up front. That allows, it's sort of like a CSA, right? It allows us to predict. It gives them a very predictable sort of supply of like new stuff every week, new exciting produce. They don't really have to think about it. They can support us at the same time. And that's going really well. And I think operationally it's going to be way easier for us. But and the other thing we've been doing is really just concentrating on our software. And we have a bunch of farm expansion projects in the work as well. So we're looking at new cities to go into, and we're working with partners there. And those kinds of deals take a long time to happen. So COVID has not really sort of slowed those down too much. But, thankfully, we're in a position where we had some cash. We just took on a new round of investment at the beginning of the year. We had a bit of flexibility. But it's been really tough. And, we've had to let some people go. And, we've certainly seen a lot of our customers just have to close down their businesses. Really unclear when New York is going to get back to normal. I think, probably this is obvious to everyone out there, but, New York now has outdoor dining where some restaurants can have some outdoor space. It's not really a realistic business opportunity for most of our customers, because they're fine dining restaurants. They're normally charging a lot of money for people to sit down and have a very unique experience. It's not normally the kind of thing you can have on the street next to a construction site, when it's raining, kind of thing. So it's really, the picture's not very rosy for New York, certainly over the next 6 months or so. We're very confident it will bounce back, and we'll be here to support chefs and to supply them with product when that happens. But in the meantime, we've got to be creative and got to build up our consumer business, and that's an exciting opportunity for us.
Yeah, absolutely. I was listening to a podcast with Danny Myers recently, Levin Madison and Gramercy Tavern, and he was saying that it's all well and good that these guys are reopening again, but they need to be like 80% capacity in order to be profitable. If it's only 50% and you've got 6 feet between tables, that they're actually still bleeding cash. So hopefully they can ramp that back up again soon. So, Rob, I have a couple of questions for you about how you've kind of evolved in terms of the variety of produce that you offer. I think I'd read or heard somewhere that you guys have grown, is it 500 different varieties historically? Or
Probably more like 700.
700 now. Wow, okay. I need an update there. Okay, so you've grown 700 different varieties of plants, and I assume some of them must have been in, reasonably small quantities. I got to be honest with you, like I'm in the plant business and the gardening business. I think I'd struggle to name 100 different plants. Like my repertoire just isn't that great. How has your sort of variety of plants that you offer changed, or is it changing as you go from that sort of high-end restaurant focus to now a subscription box focus?
Yeah, I mean, huge change because, we were in the business before of a chef coming in who might happen to be from Chile or something and say, hey, I want to get the thing I used to get in Chile. And so
Mm,
our job was to go out, find the seeds, and try to grow this thing. And, some of them were failures, some of them would work out. Some of them, a fair quantity, we could grow them, but there wasn't big enough market or it would be too expensive to grow it. And so
mm,
there's lots of ups and downs within that 700 number.
mhm,
But our job was essentially about sourcing these rare ingredients. And I think when you work with chefs, especially when we work with Michelin star chefs, you know they they know what to do with stuff. And if they come across something they never seen before, if they taste it, they can start to think about, oh, okay, this is like an anise flavor, a little bit sweet. Okay, I could pair
mhm,
this with like grapefruit, or I could use it with a creamy dish with a fish or something. Whereas home cooks can't do that. Like most people, they're familiar with a few different flavors. They're open to trying one or two new things, but
mm,
they can't really create a dish, from scratch. And so our job now in doing the subscriptions is to give people a base, some baby leaves and some microgreens.
mm,
And then we can start to use some of these specialty items as little, elements in a salad mix, or spicy additions, or edible flowers to go on top. And so the quantity mix is a little bit different.
mhm.
The variety is a little bit less, but we are still trying to incorporate some of these weird and wonderful things. So I have like in front of me, I have this Rao Ram. Just take a bit of this. This is like a Vietnamese coriander. It's called Rao Ram,
Oh, cool.
and it's really nice. It's got a sort of cilantro spiciness to it. A little bit unusual, but this is the kind of thing that we might put in the subscription box in a very small quantity, and then you'll get your microgreens as well. So you can kind of use it as a home cook, as a little garnish, but we're not expecting you to, come up with some
Have a
crazy
feast of
new
the
dish.
stuff. Yeah. Okay.
Exactly, exactly.
So, another question for you on that topic. One of the things that we have learnt over the 3 or 4 years now of running Urban Leaf is that it's very, very difficult to sell a solution or a product to a customer if it's for a problem that they don't know they have. And the translation for that in our world is that between you and me, Rob, there aren't that many people who jump out of bed in the morning and go, oh my God, I need to find a way to grow basil out of a wine bottle today. They're just few and far between. And if people aren't jumping out of bed thinking, oh my God, I need to grow basil out of a wine bottle, then, they weren't going to look for our wine bottle kits. It strikes me that you might have kind of a similar challenge with some of the rarer and exotic plants that you sell. I've heard you talk about the story of Papillo and the inspiration that was to sort of starting Farm.One. I have no idea what Papillo is, and so I'm never going to go out and look for it. How oh, here we go. You're going to show me out here. How do
No, I
you
was looking to see if we had any right now. We
okay.
don't have any right now. But,
Okay, I should have Googled it before this call. But how do you think about your kind of role as an educator and an informer and a horizon broadener of some of these amazing things that you're growing? Do you kind of take that role on, or do you just sit there and wait for someone to come along and say, hey, yeah, I need Papillo, or God damn it, I need a way to grow basil out of a wine bottle today?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think to think about the bigger picture in response to that question, it does speak to, okay, well, what is the role of a farm in a community, and what are the role of food producers, food retailers? And so, one of the roles of restaurants in a city like New York, which has hundreds of different cultures represented, is the role of a chef sometimes is to introduce new flavors to people, new things, new ingredients,
Mm,
and show how amazing they are. And chefs can do that in a way where, probably at the beginning they're going to use something familiar. This is why fusion food was such a big deal, 20 years ago. It's like taking
Hmm.
something familiar and adding something a little bit
Right.
unfamiliar, and then getting people into this idea. And good chefs can really do that. And what you'll see, and it's really obvious now, is you walk into a very mainstream food court and you'll see Vietnamese food, you'll see Thai food, you'll see
Mm.
you'll see African food, you'll see and African food having 25 different
Hmm. Hmm.
countries represented, whatever.
Hmm.
And you'll see all this stuff, like literally, if I when I was a kid, there was fish and chips and there was Chinese and maybe Indian food, and this is in the UK, and that was it. Like the
Right.
idea
Right.
of like Thai food, it's like, oh my God, right?
Yeah.
And so, culturally in the West, we've sort of started to go like, oh, okay, okay, okay. And that role has traditionally been taken on by chefs. I think what's great about the technology of vertical farming, and some of the products like yours, and some of the more elaborate ones of people being able to grow things in their own homes and stuff, is that you can use these places to introduce people to new flavors and to
Mm.
plants. And that was what was so great, while we were able to offer events and experiences, and hopefully that will
Hmm.
resume next year. But is this idea of people being able to come into this space and then experience something and taste it, maybe do a wine tasting with it or something, and do that in a way which is not like, okay, you don't have to make a whole meal for this. You don't have to subject your family to a poorly cooked,
Mm.
version of a dish that you don't know how to do. You can experience it in this kind of way. And just as people get to know wines or they get to know beers, this kind of experience and this kind of place is really essential for that. And that's why I'm, personally believe in our approach is that our farms are approachable spaces. You can see them. You're not behind 6 levels of security
Right.
before
Right.
you can go in.
Hmm.
We have a new unit at Whole Foods at Manhattan West, just across the street from Hudson Yards. It's a beautiful 12-foot long display unit, a little bit like this, and it's actually growing this blue spice basil.
Yep.
And you can see it right there. It's very approachable. And then you can get the blue spice basil on top of your pizza at the pizza counter around the corner. And then you can try this thing.
Hmm.
And that's what I think it's all about. I think it's having accessible, easy ways to try new things. And yeah, that's what I'm excited about.
Very cool. Very cool. All right, Rob, I've just got I got one or two more questions for you, but just a reminder to folks that you can use the little question box or comment box below to ask any questions. It looks like we've had a few hellos, and how's it going from Mona, Jay, and Lisa. I hope you guys are enjoying this. They're tuned in from Facebook and YouTube. But we can see the comments over on the side there. So if anyone wants to ask anything of Rob, by all means do. But Rob, I have one more for you. Rumor has it that Urban Leaf and Farm.One might be working on a little bit of a product collaboration in the future, related to microgreens. I think I can't remember exactly what you've sent us. I think there was there was definitely that blue spice basil. I think we are looking at some lemon balm, and there were a few other bits and pieces that you sent over to us. Would you be able to show us any of the sort of variety of stuff that you're growing there? Could we have I'm not sure what sort of computer you've got us on right now. Is it
Yeah,
amenable
I
to a
mean, I
little
can
tour
show
or
you
not?
some things. Yeah, I can show you some little things. So I'm just sort of wedged in one corner of the farm, so you won't see everything. But behind me here, we've got a little bit of this lemon gem marigold right there. So it's a marigold which has those beautiful little yellow
Hmm.
flowers on it. And
Very
that's
cool.
got a beautiful sort of lemony, citrusy oil flavor and aroma to it. We've got a regular marigold here, which is kind of a little bit boring, but I like the taste. The
Well,
flowers are very
but
pretty.
you've got pretty high
Um,
standards when it comes to plants and being boring, Rob.
I know, right? um, this I think is a pink candy pops mint. It's not flowering right now, so it's hard to tell, but it's a variety of mint.
Okay.
And then behind me here, we've got some summer savory. This is beautiful. It's really it tends to be if you grow it outdoors, it'll be quite sort of sticky and pungent, a little bit like thyme. But when you grow it indoors, it's a little bit softer, and you can actually chop this up really, really easily. I love it in pasta. You could do, even like something like a cacio e pepe, and then you would
Oh wow.
chop this up and do like a bean out like sort of preparation with that would be pretty great.
Mm.
Next to it, we've got our friend the purple oxalis, which has
Mm-hmm.
these beautiful triangular butterfly like leaves. These are lovely. They're very, very sour.
Yep. Very
And then up
citrusy
here we've got a
flavor right here. Is it
exactly.
citrusy? Citrusy
And then
soury?
this,
Have I got that right?
yeah, it's almost like a plum skin, I think is a pretty good analogy, or like a green apple.
Mm-hmm.
It's got
Oh,
that
okay. Okay.
acidity. Yeah, and then we've got a cinnamon basil up here, which is really nice. And then if you look down the rows here, I think we have a micro kale here. The
Okay.
label's all the way at the back. I can't tell, but we've got some lettuce as well further down, all
Yeah.
kinds of microgreens down there.
Just a
And they're
forest,
similar sort of.
forest of green goodness you've got going on there. Amazing.
Exactly.
Cool.
Yeah, so a few things like that, and we're
Mm-hmm.
excited to work with you guys on picking a couple of varieties from micros and things that might be easy to grow and reliable and fit
Super.
into your selection. So yeah.
Amazing. I'm looking forward to that. Looking forward to checking few more of these things out.
Yeah.
Robert, doesn't look like any of the folks dialed in a game to ask us a question. I promise he doesn't bite. I know he looks a little bit tough and with the shaved head and all, but I promise you, he's a very
Oh,
pretty harmless character. He won't bite. He's very polite. But Rob, we might need to wrap things up now and let you get home. Where can people find you online? Where should they look for you?
I mean, really just come to our website. It's very, very easy. It's just farm.one.
Mm-hmm.
And we're also on Instagram, and that's a great place to see some of the variety of things we've got going on. So it's just Instagram and farm.one as well. And yeah, really the best way to sort of try our stuff right now is through the subscription program. And then also you'll be able to, if you sign up for our newsletter, you'll be able to look out for some new software that we're going to be releasing later this year. And when New York City gets back to normal, let's hope for a vaccine or instant testing or something like that, and then you'll be able to visit our farm again. But in the meantime, in New York City, you can also see us at Whole Foods at Manhattan West, and that's a beautiful way to see some of the plants as well.
Amazing. Thanks so much, Rob. Listen, it's been really, really good to catch up with you. Thanks for sharing the update with us and telling us a story about what you've been up to lately. I look forward to maybe catching up with you over a beer sometime soon in New York.
That sounds good, man. Good to
Cool.
talk to you, Nate.
Likewise. Take
All the
care, Rob.
best.
Guys, thank you so much for tuning in today. This has been a new series called Growing Places, where we aim to uncover the stories of the entrepreneurs and innovators like this guy here to my right, who are changing the way we eat. Thanks again, Rob from Farm.One, and everyone have a good evening. Take care. Bye.